Good morning, Year 9 into Year 10, and welcome to this tutorial on Paper 1, Question 4. So last week we looked at Paper 1, Question 3, and we thought about structure. And what Question 4 really does is it brings those first three questions together. We're looking at both language, structure, and it's starting to make you think about your opinions now as well. So the question really focuses on this idea of to what extent do you agree. Now, the question always has these 3 bullet points. Write about your own impressions of the text, evaluate how the writers created these impressions, and support your opinions with references from the text. So there's already given you 3 key things you need to do. So that writing about impressions of the text is your ability to be able to use evidence, your ability to be able to think about tone and mood, and to be able to use vocabulary appropriately for it. When it talks about evaluating the writers, how they've created it, you need to be thinking about those language techniques, things like metaphors, similes, and so forth. You know, using those green words again. Where is the focus? Where is there a shift? How are things structured? And again, that last bullet point, support your opinions with references, means that really what they're looking for is lots of evidence that you are able to understand the way that a text works and why it works in that way. So you want to think about that relationship between the reader and the writer. How are they trying to manipulate us to feel a certain way or to give us a certain message? So on that stance, I thought we'd start with a picture this time. So the question always gives sort of a statement that you then have to respond to. So in this case, I've given you quite a famous image from the last couple of years. The student has viewed this picture and said the photographer has successfully captured a moment of hope. To what extent do you agree? So you might decide that actually looking at image, there is that hope. You know, the little boy is being given water. Clearly the woman is looking and caring for him at this moment in time. However, you could also argue that, you know, there's that sense of desperation. You know, he's very skinny. You can see his ribs. You know, there are people walking past in the background, sort of ignoring him. You know, the reality is, you know, how long would she be there for? Is this just a moment of hope versus, you know, a lifetime of suffering? So just like an image, and you would evaluate the sort of to what extent you agreed in those. You want to do the same with the text. So this is the question that we're going to look at today. You can download the extract off of Show My Homework and do give it a good read. So we're looking at the idea of a student having read this section of the text said the writer successfully created a sense of understanding and comradeship between the two students. To what extent do you agree? So we're looking at a text from A Quiet Kind of Thunder. We want to think about the way that it's being done. All right. So Reese, standing slightly to the left of Mrs. Stafford, is waiting patiently. He is still looking at me, but his smile has faded slightly, and he looks a little confused. Who is this gormless girl? He is clearly thinking. Gosh, Miss Stafford muttered, what a start to the year. Let me try again, Reese. He clapped a hand on Reese's shoulder, then gestures to me. As he does so, he turns his head so he is looking directly into Reese's face. This is Stephanie, he said loudly. Stephanie. Oh dear Lord. Reese's face breaks into a warm, if slightly amused grin. He looks at me, then raises his hand into a wave. Hello. So I'm just going to take that first bit of the extract. So we've actually started halfway through the actual whole extract. You do need to read the whole thing and then make sure that you read from where is expected. Okay. So we've got this very awkward introduction between these two students. One is deaf, one is mute, selective mute. And Mr. Stafford, the teacher, is really well hamming this up, isn't he? He's not doing particularly well. He's a bit awkward about it. He's a little inept at it. He doesn't really cause it. And yet Reese doesn't sort of respond in that way. There's that sort of sense of him being quite friendly. I'm already getting sort of that tone of sort of humour coming through. Okay. So what you want to do as you read the extract, you want to think about these 3 things, okay, to begin with. What happens in the extract? So what clear event or characters there? On those focus lines, where does that tone and mood, what is portrayed and why is it portrayed in that way? And then think about that statement. So as you're reading, you want to think about to what extent do you agree? You don't want to sit in the middle of this line and go, well, I do in this way and I do in that, I don't in this way. You want to have an opinion and you want to create sort of a discussion, a debate in itself. So what you want to do then is you want to start going back and you want to reread it and you need to annotate it. So those on the left here are all the sort of stages you go through. So you need to think about that meaning. So as you did already, like what's the extract about? Is there any particular themes? Where does it start? Where does it end? Again, back to tone. Think about the characters. Well, who's the narrative voice? Is there one narrative voice? Is there more? Is there dialogue? How does that change things? And you want to think about setting as well. Like, where is it set? Is it a particular time of day? And as you do those things, you want to be thinking about the language that is used. So the things that are in the purple box on this side here. So things like similes, metaphors, maybe a certain adjective or particular verb that's being used. You might want to think about how different characters speak even. And you also want to be going back to those green words. And these are things that you've already used in 2 of your answers, guys. So you've already done this for your language in paper 1, question 2. And you've already done the structure in paper 1, question 3. So really all it is doing is bringing those skills together and using them all in the same answer. So once you've annotated, you want to start writing your response. Now we've put lots of different sentence starters here for you. And you do want to start with something like, I agree with this statement because, or certainly I agree, or one of the key ideas to support this interpretation. If you can remember those orange words from the classroom, things like truth and justice and honour and so forth, then that might actually help you to structure your response as well. You can argue against it though. You can say things like, arguably this part of the text highlights it. On the other hand, this does that, right? Just be careful of, you don't want to sit on that fence. You don't want 2 in favour and 2 against it, okay? You need to be thinking about that vocabulary as well that you're using. So instead of just saying, repeating the words that are in the statement, so for example in our one, understanding and comradeship, you might want to think about the idea of solidarity or cohesion, or that idea of being gentle or inspirational, that rapport between them, all right? And a thesaurus is your friend. Use it. Make sure that you think about the context you're using it in, and it's far better to have a go. So I'm going to give you an example of a quote that I chose. So Reese's face breaks into a warm, if slightly amused grin. Now I've highlighted in green there key words and vocabulary that I'm going to pick out of it. So I'm thinking about the idea of breaking and into a warm. So that adjective choice of warm sort of really sort of sense that of comfort, and it sort of contrasts the awkwardness of the teacher sort of saying, you know, he's deaf and screaming, you know, sort of breaking down Stephanie's name into sort of a slightly patronising way. And I actually want to look at that sort of additional sort of clause of slightly amused, that use of the adverb slightly, that sense there's sort of like a secrecy already that they understand that the teacher sort of missed. That sort of compassion maybe sort of the sense that he's a sort of a cheerful character, he sort of expects certain things from people. And what I want to do is I want to back up my main quote with a little one, and I've chosen just one word, the minor sentence, hello. And I'm thinking about the fact that actually after that sort of awkwardness and that sort of ludicrousness of him sort of talking down to Stephanie and Reese, you get this very simple hello between them, and Reese starts it. And so I'm going to look at that minor sentence and I'm going to think of that sort of, is it just out of politeness, or is there sort of an understanding and empathy between them that, you know, just like many teenagers, you know, the embarrassment of teachers, the ridiculousness of adulthood, that can be, you know, that transcends whether you are deaf or a mute. It's just that sort of young versus old sort of idea. Now what I've done as well underneath is I've then sort of built that into how I would start my answer. So I've started with, certainly I agree that Barnard, who's our writer, demonstrates a sense of companionship between Reese and Steffi. So I haven't actually taken the word comradeship, which is in it. I've thought about that companionship from their awkward introduction, right? So I haven't taken a quote actually from that sort of first bit where this teacher is talking about, is introducing them. Reese's face breaks into a warm, slightly amused grin, reveals, so I'm using my Chris Rice words, his light-hearted and caring nature through the positive adjectives. Okay, so I've started to define, but I need to go further than that. My analysis is not enough yet. Furthermore, the reader shares. Okay, so I'm thinking about the reader now and thinking about why the writer is doing it this way. Shares the comical moment with the two through the observation of the slightly, the adverb here emphasising the teacher's clumsiness and ineptitude at successfully navigating an introduction with both students' communication issues. So what I've done here is I've thought about my the tone and the mood that's being presented, and I then linked it to the effect it's having in that setting, what's happened in the text itself. So just were those broken down bits when you've annotated. Now I want to finish with my final quote because I want to support that idea that I've got there. So I'm starting with that word consequently. Consequently, the minor sentence, so I'm defining the structure. Hello at the end of the paragraph highlights his unfounded concerns and instead implies the universal ease of greeting and simplicity of friendship already between Rhys and Steffi. So I'm starting to think about how their friendship is being presented and actually how it fits within our own concept of society. Now, all I've done next is to put therefore as the text continues. And so I'm building my argument. I don't want it to just be paragraphs of analysis that don't build upon each other. It needs to, just like you would argue whether you prefer, I don't know, salt and vinegar crisps over cheese and onion crisps, you would have an argument and you would do it naturally. You would allow ideas to flow, and you want to do that in your writing when you're debating. And so with that in mind, I've put this at the end and you can come back to this. I want you to check, once you've written your answer on GCSE Pod, or if you want to practice on paper, that's absolutely up to you. I want you to check your checklist, okay? I want you to think about if you have actually discussed how the writer presents the point. So have you used a range of different examples, quotes and so forth? Have you thought about the techniques that are being used? What method is being used? That's your number 2. Okay, now you've got the sentence starters on the other one to help you, as well as some of the techniques on slide 4. I want you to use lots of mini quotations, so 1 or 2 word phrases and embed within a sentence, okay? So supporting, looking and analysing. You need to be talking about that sort of character or subject of the extract. Okay, you need to be thinking about why the writer is doing certain things and show that you understand that this is a piece of text that is written for a purpose. Your connectives are your number 5, so linking your ideas together. So furthermore, on the other hand, consequently. And finally, developing those ideas just beyond your first statement. So using those Chris Rice words. I've put a few other additional things there, which suggests, which intended, is achieved by. Right, so really all you're doing with this answer is that you are showing you have an opinion, you're using evidence from the text, and you're analysing how that evidence is used to create a certain debate. So good luck, Year 9. I look forward to reading your responses on GCSE Pod. Have a lovely day.